Welcome to another episode of the Hat Collecting Talk Show, where we talk about the many metaphorical hats that people wear throughout their lives, and also related things like age, mental health, schedules, community, and more. I am your host, Lacey Artemis. I am a creative Jill of all trades, and you can find me online as Artemis Creates. My guest today is Laur, who is a photographer and gamer, an avid backpacker, and the creator of the TransPeerNetwork on Discord. Laura is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns for the listeners. Thank you so much for being on the show, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
As the regular listeners will kind of now know, there's a series of questioning that I go through, and it's been slowly evolving over time, but I think I'm getting closer to what will probably be the final. So there's a few new questions in today's episode and a few familiar favorites. We're going to start with a brief land acknowledgement here. Something I want to start doing. Laura and I both live in Toronto presently, and Toronto, or Tekaronto, is a dish with one spoon territory. There's a dish with one spoon treaty territory, a treaty established between the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. I'm still getting used to saying all of that, but it's important. So I know that you are not originally from Toronto. Did you want to talk a little bit about where you are from and maybe share anything that you think people should know about that?
Sure. Yeah, I moved here pretty much a year ago. This is my first time living in North America. I lived in Europe first, but before moving to Toronto, I lived in Berlin for 8 years, more or less. And before that, I moved around a bunch between Germany, Hungary, France, mostly those three, mostly growing up in Germany first and then going to high school in Hungary. And then university in Berlin. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything like misconceptions or things that like you've heard people say about Germany or Berlin that you want to like correct or clarify?
I think the biggest one that I always find very funny is that for a lot of people in North America, Bavaria is Germany, or like the Bavarian stereotypes are what they equate with all of Germany, even though they're very specific to that area. So people in most parts of Germany don't wear lederhosen. Oktoberfest is not really something that is celebrated in Berlin, for example. All of these things are very specifically Bavarian stereotypes. And you can very much see how, because of how Germany was divided between the victors of World War II, you can see how the stereotypes in North America are very much from the US territories. So that's always been really fun to see.
So a thing I did forget to just mention, I realized, sorry not to change the subject suddenly, but I'm excited to say that by the time you're listening to this or watching this, the show is on Spotify. It is live there, and it should also be on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. And I'm trying to get it out to as many different places as I can, because I know not everyone will want to sit and watch, an hour of video or whatever. So I'm excited about that. It's kind of a new step for me. I haven't done like Spotify and stuff before. We're going to head into the questioning here. So the first question, as we're all familiar with, is what are some things that you're currently working on?
I pretty much have one big project, and that's the TransPeerNetwork that you mentioned before. I work on that right now mostly on Discord, but that's expanding at some point in the future. So that's taking up about 60 hours a week. So I don't really have a lot of time for other projects next to it. But because it's a huge thing, there's a lot of different aspects to it, I would say. So that's what I do all day.
You do definitely have to wear many hats to run a community, that's for sure. I remember seeing a tweet from you at one point about like how it wasn't really your plan to start a Discord server. It just kind of like, can you talk a little bit more about that? How did that actually come about?
Sure. So the first beginning, I would say, that I can pinpoint was last year, American Thanksgiving, where I just, all throughout the day, people were talking about how it's difficult because either they can't be with their families or they have to be with their families, or like all of these things. Like for queer people in general, like just being with family is often very difficult. And I was sitting here on the couch and I was like, well, it's Thursday. I'm in Canada. Thanksgiving has already happened. I don't really care. So let's just do something nice for people who need a space or need some place to be. And so I just tweeted out my Discord and was like, hey, just join me on Discord. Let's hang out with it. At that point, I was at like 1,200 followers or something. So the amount of people who came was not that big. It was like 4 or 5 people who showed up during the night. But we had a really good time just chatting in the background. And so because that went really well, I did the same thing again for New Year's. By that point, there were many more people joining. So we had, I think, 40-something people who came in at some point over the night. We had a 14-hour hangout. We streamed it to Twitch and had a couple hundred people watching there. And it just was this really nice, fun New Year's party for a bunch of people who didn't want to or couldn't go to other New Year's parties in person. And because everybody loved it so much, they asked me to make these more often. And I really enjoyed hosting that. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's do this every week. And so in mid-January, I started hosting weekly hangouts just on Discord, but not with a server, just a private DM call that people joined in. And people kept asking for a Discord server and kept asking for a Discord server. And I used to run a 500, 600 member competitive PvP MMO guild for a couple of years, which was a lot of work and a lot of frustration. And at some point, I just gave up on that, or like I stepped down. I was like, y'all have to deal with this without me. This is too much work. And so I back then had sworn to myself, I will never ever again manage an online community because it's just too much of a hassle. It's not worth it. It's too much. And so when I made the Discord server, I said, listen, this is here. I'll have this as a lobby for the calls, but I'm not going to let this become its own thing. I'm not going to let this become like a community Discord or something because that's too much work. And I need to find a job and I need to make money. And then I kept applying for jobs here in Toronto already before lockdown started. And it was really hard and I didn't really find anything. And after hundreds of resumes sent and 2 callbacks altogether with no actual job, at some point I got really angry because I applied for a job that I was absolutely perfect for. That was basically what I'm doing now. And I didn't hear back from them. And I got really annoyed and was like, okay, okay, I give up. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to lean into this TPN thing that I started accidentally, and I'm just going to push for this. And so over the last 8 months, I've turned that into my job. So we started this server in early February. At this point, it's, again, like 60 hours a week at least. So it's a full-time job. I'm getting some money on Patreon, and that helps. It's not a full-time salary yet, but we're getting there. And yeah, it was a quick little thing that I started and just kept growing and growing and growing. And now we are at almost 800 members. And
yeah, I've been on that server not since the very beginning, but since I think earlier this year. And like I've seen it grow, and like I know you didn't have the intention to become a community manager, essentially, but
no, I did. I just meant to do that somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
I applied for community management positions in other places. That's already my background is in community management, event management, project management. So I have the background. I was just going to do that for one of the queer LGBT organizations here in Toronto instead of for my own.
See, it's interesting because this has come up on previous episodes where we talk about how like you want to do something, you do something, and you're trying to get like someone to pay you to do it. And a lot of times we're just sort of, maybe forced isn't the right word, but just we end up doing it ourselves anyways. And sometimes we get lucky and it actually takes off and it becomes what we wanted anyways, if not quite the way we expected. And sounds like this has kind of been that for you, except without the like, proper salary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
for now,
yeah. I do encourage everyone to get on Patreon and support this. It's definitely a worthy cause and a great community. So the next question here on our list is, when you were a child, when you were young, do you remember what you wanted to be or to do when you grew up?
I honestly mostly defaulted to doctor because my dad was a doctor. It's not something I really thought about that much. I didn't really have a lot of future plans. Having an enthusiastic plan about my future and where I want to go long term is a very new thing. That kind of just became possible after I came out and transitioned and actually enjoyed the idea of a future me. So I didn't have like any big plans that were like set in stone for a long time.
Okay. And so I know roughly what your age is. I don't remember exactly, but this next question kind of centers around this idea of age 30 being this magical milestone that you either have everything figured out and you're successful, or it's too late and you're screwed. So when the age of 30 comes for you, do you have a sense of like where you want to be in relation to your goals and your plans at that point?
I would dispute that age 30 means something, especially in trans and queer circles. I would say that those are cis timelines, and the best thing we can do, and the best thing that I have found for myself to do, and what I tell everybody else to do, is to just ignore them. It's not meaningful. It doesn't matter. We don't work in the same. Our lives don't work the same way. I'm in puberty right now. I'm 28. It's absurd. It's fine. Just deal with it.
No, for sure.
I don't really consider I just turned 28 on Monday, so I don't consider. Thank you. I don't really think about those things in that way. I don't think that my 30s are going to be very much like cishet 30s are supposed to be, and I don't really mind that. I don't have big plans outside of the TPN. I want it by then to have it set up as a nonprofit, have the opportunity to pay myself a salary, hopefully pay other people's salaries as well. That would be really cool. I have a lot of plans for where to take the TPN. Outside of that, I don't really have big other plans.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you about the age 30 thing being like it's more this cultural narrative, and you're definitely right. Like on this show so far, it hasn't been intentional, but I think all but maybe one of my guests, like a lot of them have been trans or non-binary, and most of us, if not all of us, have also had some kind of neurodiversity. And so for people in either of those categories or in both of those categories, like normal, quote unquote, normal timelines mean nothing. And so I think you're absolutely right. And so the idea here is, though, I'm trying to address kind of society more broadly. So it just so happens that we've had a lot of people that don't follow those norms as much. And so that does affect that, like, well, yeah, a lot of us are not going to have. But even I think I'm curious how many people who are like cis or who are not neurodivergent are sort of on that track more so. So we're going to continue rolling along here. So this is a new question for the listeners. We've all had people say discouraging things to us about our dreams or goals. But I thought to kind of do like a bit of a more fun twist on this, I would ask, has there ever been like an obviously or hilariously bad piece of advice that you've heard given to someone or given to yourself?
I'm sure there's many that I just don't remember. I'm not very good at recalling things I don't like.
Fair enough.
It's a coping mechanism. I remember one thing where after high school, I graduated high school, and I was basically sitting down and being like, okay, so what university do I go to? What classes do I take? What kind of what's my direction? And back then the first choice I took was law. And so I went to Berlin and I started studying law. And after a year of that, after 2 months, basically, I realized that this is not for me, because it wasn't taught as a science or as a scholarly endeavor. It was very much taught as a toolkit, as these are the laws, this is how you use them for your advantage, learn them, and then that's it. And I am much too critical and much too curious for that, to do that for years and years. And so I dropped out of that and went over to political sciences, which was same topic, but actually like why and are you sure this is good is encouraged instead of discouraged. And my granddad got very upset because in his mind, you need to do law, you need to do STEM or you need to do. That's pretty much it. Yeah, it's law or STEM. So he's a doctor, and he decided that this was a bad mistake for me because I should have picked something more reasonable to study. And yeah, that obviously didn't work for me because those are not the fields that make sense. And the idea of choosing a field because of your idea about the entire field and stuff, because that's something that you're passionate about, doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked briefly about this with past guests. Of a lot of us have kind of heard the thing of like, if you're creative when you're young and you're like, I want to go do something artistic, like, well, that can never pay the bills. And this is something like it has come up a few times, and a lot of people, like my dad, kind of said a similar thing to me, where it's like, you should get a job in the trades. And I had some interest in some of that stuff, but I've just always had too much artistic ideas and drive and inspiration. And so it's been a matter of trying to find a way to make that into something like it's not paying the bills yet, but that's kind of the hope for one day. So our next question here, we're going to do another sort of trying to find a positive out of something a little less ideal. The pandemic has obviously disrupted most people's plans and lives and forced us to adapt on the fly. But have there been any positives or silver linings that have resulted from the disruption for you?
Definitely. I applied for jobs from home before the pandemic started. I had just moved to Toronto. It was winter. I didn't really leave the apartment much. I didn't really know many people yet because I had just moved here. And so when lockdown happened, it didn't really change much other than the frequency of grocery shopping runs, because I was doing the same thing I did before, basically. What the silver lining for me is that because I had this TPN and had the Hangouts set up a couple of weeks, maybe a month and a half in advance of lockdown starting in North America, it meant that by the time everybody was suddenly stuck at home, by the time all the local support groups closed down, by the time everybody needed online community, we were already up and running, and we had the infrastructure set up, and we had the basic experience already figured out. And so we had a huge increase. We went from 1 to 3 Hangouts a week. We went from a couple dozen members to several hundred members. And for the TransPeerNetwork, and thus for my job, it was a huge boost because it was exactly what people asked for and needed in the time when lockdown started. So that has been a big bonus. I'm getting kind of tired of it. I'm getting tired of the border closure. Most of my friends are in the US, and some of them are very close, like 3-4 hours drive from here, and there's no way to see them, and that's kind of rough. But when it comes to what I was trying to build before that, and when it comes to what I'm working now, honestly, lockdown is ideal conditions for me.
Yeah, I just to kind of touch on it again briefly from my side, I've been very fortunate in my life situation as well, and the lockdown has afforded me a lot more space and time to work on my aspirations, and that's been it's also been the culmination of years of kind of working at it. And I finally this year just happened that I finally felt like I found the right combination, the right theme. I really feel like I hit my stride this year, and I'm really excited about that. And I mean, just been bad news after bad news after bad news. But as much as there's been rough changes, there have been some unexpected positives, and that's something I do want to try to share with my audience. So another question that's been a mainstay of this show, it's something I think it's important to talk about and try to get a variety of perspectives on. Have you dealt with any disabilities or mental health challenges in your life, and how have you worked through them?
Yeah, I mean, no physical disabilities that I know of, or that have any kind of effect on my life. Mental wise, I have ADHD, which is currently undiagnosed because I don't have the money to pay for a diagnosis for adults in Ontario. So that's something that I have to self-medicate for. I deal with anxiety a lot. I have dealt with a lot of depression. That's been much better lately, and I haven't felt that way in a very long time. But those are definitely things that have an impact. And because none of it is really medicated for me, it's mostly coping mechanisms. When it comes to ADHD, it's coping mechanisms like lists of lists of lists of lists and reminders that remind me of the reminders that I set. And just finding an environment that works for me and finding a workflow that works for me. And with anxiety, it's mostly talking about it. For me, it's a lot of anxiety around very important special relationships for me. And so what helps me is very openly talking about those so that the people around me who can trigger those issues for me can accommodate for those and understand what's happening when I start behaving in a way they don't understand. So just being very aware of what triggers it, what causes it, what feelings are involved in that, and communicating those openly has been very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually brings up a good point that is kind of when I was hanging out with Flower, actually a guest from episode 3, I was hanging out at their apartment a little while ago, and they were having a mental health episode while I was there, and I had never experienced that particular type of an episode before, and I had absolutely no idea what to do. And so thankfully Flower's wife was there, and I said, is Flower okay? And then they kind of took care of it. But then that made me think, going forward with my friends, if they confide in me or confide publicly that they have any kind of mental health issue or even disability, maybe it's not mental, and say, okay, what do you need? Like when we're spending time together, what do you need? How can I help? How can I not make it worse unintentionally? Yeah. And I think that's something to be aware of for everybody. So thank you for bringing that to light. So this next question, perhaps a little bit redundant, but just in case you have a little bit more that you want to say about it, to people who are under 30 and feel lost and not sure what to do, I know you said we kind of all like it, but is there any like more specific thing that you might want to say to those people?
God, it's hard to give advice to people who are, my age and in my situation, especially because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing things. But for me, that's been working out really well. So for me, what helps, and like this is something I don't like to give advice on because everybody's different. Everybody has different backgrounds, different abilities around these things. I have the luxury and privilege to be able to just kind of do my thing, and I'm allowed to fail. And that makes a huge difference. I am allowed to fail. And if I completely, utterly fail, I have something to fall back on that is going to protect me. And that means that I have been able to just kind of go with it and be like, I'll figure it out when I get there. I don't have to have a 5-year plan. I have a 2 months plan, and I have a vague idea of the direction I want to move in long term. So for me, it's been very much a following my passion and following my interests and following what I know I'm good at instead of what brings in enough money to pay the bills. But I'm very uncomfortable suggesting that as a general piece of advice because that comes from a place of immense privilege and in a financial economic sense. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And ADD just struck me again because, again, I've mentioned before the challenge of being both the host and the producer at the same time. I can't literally do both at once. So I'm trying to like listen as intently as I can, but also try to be aware of like noise so I can mute myself. And sometimes I think of something I want to say while the guest is talking, and by the time they finish talking, it's gone, which just happened to me. So I guess
I definitely know that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that's the blessing and the curse of ADD. But yeah, I definitely, even with that struggle and with those challenges, this is, and you're right, like everyone is different and we kind of all just have to find our way. And I think this show is, again, it wasn't intentionally meant to have a mostly kind of like trans or neurodiverse audience. That's kind of the way it's shaken out so far, but I am seeking to get more variety of guests and more like kind of typical or normative guests, I guess, maybe for lack of a better term. And since I can't remember what I wanted to say, I'm just going to move on. Yeah, I've got copious show notes here for the listeners, and even so, things still get away from me sometimes. So the next question here, and this is one that I have asked on previous episodes. Do you have a peak time of day? I know I've talked to you kind of a bit more privately about this, or on some of the TPN calls, but this comes to the idea that I've seen, if you've ever seen these like charts or graphics, maybe on social media, where they talk about these like famous artists like Beethoven or Picasso, and like what their daily schedules are like and how they compare, like which one are you most like? And I thought it's kind of a funny idea, but so I'm just asking different people because it's interesting to see where different people fall.
I do not have a schedule. So I go to bed somewhere between midnight and 4 a.m. and I wake up somewhere between 6 and 10 a.m., I guess. And so I don't really have, because I don't have a job that like requires me to be in a certain place at a certain time, because sometimes I work until 1, 2 a.m. on the TPN Hangouts, because I have a lot of friends in very, very, very different time zones from North America. I absolutely don't have any kind of peak time or peak anything. I have trained myself over the years with constantly being very much online and not working in office jobs too much, to just go with whatever happens. And so by the time, at some point, I'm going to be tired and I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to sleep for a couple of hours and then be awake for a couple of hours and sleep some more and then be awake again. And I can usually jump into productivity mode pretty quickly, if ADHD lets me. So I don't really have any kind of schedule like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I still have an actual day job, although it's a very flexible one, and I've been working in a pretty flexible job for a few years now. So my schedule is closer to like a typical kind of 9 to 5, but like again, since the shutdown, like I've been working from home full time since March, so my day is very kind of like malleable. As you mentioned, the different time zones, there are a few people from other continents that I'm talking to about coming on the show, so trying to coordinate that, especially Australia, that's a really tough one. But actually I do want to mention, before I forget, before ADD steals it from me again, so as I said, I do want to get more of a variety of guests on this show, and that's not only age-wise and gender-wise and like race-wise, like I want to have, so essentially what I'm trying to drive at here is, if you'd be interested in coming on this show and answering these questions and talking about stuff, you can reach out to me at hatcollectingshow@gmail.com, and I'll try to figure something out. But it might just take a little while because I do have a bit of a queue going right now. But to continue on here, this is also a new question that I'm starting to ask, and it may or may not stick. We'll see. What would you say are your two most dissimilar hats? So basically your two most dissimilar skills or interests or that sort of thing.
I would say it's, on the one hand, community management, and on the other hand, backpacking. Because one is very stationary and very focused on a lot of people and on social interactions between these people and on creating a space where people can be together. And then the other is about just disappearing into the woods for a week, not really meeting anybody, not really spending time with anybody, not really being around people, and just walking, getting up in the morning, walking, going to bed, getting up in the morning, walking, going to bed. And those two things are very different in what they give me and why I love them, and in what kind of skill sets they require. And they're my two main things that I do. So
that is a great first example for that question. I like it. So another question here, I think I asked this in a couple of bonus episodes now, but I'm going to try it on the main show. What is the last new thing you learned, whether it was like a concept, a fact, a skill, or something like that? And what is the next new thing that you'd like to learn or try?
I'm sorry, my life is literally centered around one thing, so my answers are always going to be the same. It's Discord, honestly. It's a huge app, and we have 12, I think, different bots that are running on this server and making all of those work and making them work together and figuring out how to make all of the technical background aspects of this community work seamlessly and safely has been a huge challenge and something that I'm still learning. So that's been the big thing that I've learned in this year as a skill or as a knowledge base. And the next one is going to be, I'm going to have to sit down at some point and look at Canadian not-for-profit law and how to turn things into not-for-profit and how to deal with budgeting and finances and the legal background of all of those things. And that's going to be that's the big next step for me. And that's a skill or an area of expertise that I don't have yet that I know I'm going to have to acquire soon.
Yeah, that definitely sounds despite the fact that my day job is kind of in the accounting bookkeeping realm, it's certainly not something that I ever enjoy spending copious amounts of time on. And, I don't even do my own taxes, and I'm thankful for that. I have someone that does them, so I don't envy you, and I hope that maybe somebody in your network might be able to help you with that, with giving you some tips or things like that. So the next and kind of the last question, I guess, in this current series of questioning, are there any causes or charities that you would like to raise awareness of or bring more attention to, besides the obvious things like Black Lives Matter and Antifa and missing and murdered Indigenous women, those sorts of things?
It's gonna still be an obvious one because, I did when was that? Over the winter, before I started doing the TPN full time, I did the training course for TransLifeline to be a volunteer for them. They have a really comprehensive, amazing training regime that you can do online. And so I'm not even going to ask so much for, obviously financial contributions, I'm always great, but they're also always desperately looking for volunteers who can work on the phones. And having been working with the trans community for this long, I've spent a lot of time dealing with suicide and with all kinds of issues surrounding that topic. And I know that while they have issues and things that are difficult for a TransLifeline to deal with, what is going to help them most and what is volunteers there and financing. So that's usually what I focus on, and that's what I would do myself if I had the opportunity to do so.
Very good. Yeah, I've talked to several people that really strongly recommend feels like the wrong word, but that promote them. And it's definitely an important service because unfortunately trans rights and trans safety is very much kind of under fire again right now. But yeah, it's really it's unique in what I've seen so far compared to other suicide hotlines or crisis hotlines, in that it focuses so specifically on one specific experience, being trans people, that only trans people work there, that they are very aware of the very specific difficulties that trans people often deal with. And there's a lot of reasons why trans people will not call other hotlines. And I really support and like the ethics and theory behind how TransLifeline is set up for those reasons. Yeah, that's very important. And thank you for bringing that to the show. As I don't know if I've explicitly said this before or not, but the show does aim to be both educational and entertaining and to bring awareness to things. So, and of course, to kind of help build some more community. So it's really great to get to talk to people who are kind of doing all those things. And as you kind of mentioned, immense privilege, that is something that this is part of why I'm doing this as well, because I have a lot of privilege as well. And as the show grows and more people are watching and listening, I do want to kind of get more things out that people should know about and that they might would actually support if they knew that they exist. So that is great. So now we're going to get into, or I guess the home stretch here. The final thing is doing the plugs. So if anyone wants to find you online, to connect with you, to follow what you do, where should they go to do that?
Right now, the best place is Twitter. I'm My @ is @I'm_just_Laur. And that's where you can find me. That's where you're going to see updates for the TransPeerNetwork. You can check out the hashtag. It's just #TransPeerNetwork in one word, where you're going to see all the updates I have for that. If you want to support it, in my pinned tweet on Twitter, you can find all the links to different options where you can support it financially. That's where you can find a way to get the invitation link if you want to join it yourself, if you're trans or non-binary or in any other way not cis. And that's my plug.
Okay, so that's great for the listeners. I also will have it up on the screen on YouTube, and in the podcast description, I'm putting all of the links as well. So I do try to make sure, because again, I realize some people are listening, so they're not going to see what's on the screen for YouTube. But speaking of that, if you have been enjoying these episodes and you want to keep enjoying them, please do come and like and subscribe on YouTube. That will help to kind of get more people to see it. And I do a bonus episode with each guest where you kind of record a little bit extra after the main episode, and that goes out on my Patreon page. So that's currently you can get on there for $1 a month, and you'll get each bonus episode as it comes out, and probably early before the main episode goes live. And of course, you also get to kind of influence what other stuff that I'm doing. So please consider that. And I also, this is the first time I'm actually remembering to mention this, I have merch because I do design as a side thing, more of like a hobby, but I have done various designs, and you can get them on like shirts and pillows and backpacks and things like that. So and mugs. I don't have my branded mug here right now. It's the one time I forgot it. It's in the other room. But yeah, so if you want to check out some of those designs and maybe like some of them, that's artemismerch.com. And again, that link will be in the description. And I'm trying to make sure I don't forget anything else important here. My show notes. Oh, yes. And this show you can find at hatcollecting.com or at hatcollecting on all social media platforms. So please consider subscribing there as well, or following, I guess. And we're going to round this out and do the bonus episode. But we're going to do something new today for the first time, because unfortunately our guest does not have a hat handy. So we are going to mime putting hats on to wave goodbye, just to kind of keep the tradition alive here. So if you, so we can maybe on the count of 3, we can mime putting hats on.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. So these are our lovely invisible hats. I hope that you enjoy them. And thank you so much for being on the show, Laur. And again, if you want to keep hearing from Laur and hear what other, there's some more interesting questions I've got cooked up here. So if you'd like to hear more from Laur, then please come on over to Patreon and subscribe for the bonus episodes. Thank you for listening and watching.